Hello everybody. Welcome to our fifth meeting of Bright Garden Voices. Bright Garden Voices is a project that intends to provide a platform for constructive dialogue between Armenians and Azerbaijanis. We are hosting Zoom meetings where guests from both sides will share their experiences and ideas concerning different matters related to the Azerbaijani and Armenian conflicts and issues. Each meeting has an audience which can propose questions or comments that they will send to the chat to the moderators. And these meetings are recorded and later are made available online on YouTube and as a podcast. This initiative is the project of three enthusiasts for peace and dialogue who want to build bridges between Armenians and Azerbaijanis. We have no external funding or association with any government or organization. I'll introduce myself very briefly. My name is Diego Ardoan. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I've been involved in Armenian studies for some time and also in some peace building activities between the local Armenian and Turkish community. And well, lately I've got more involved in the also Armenian Azerbaijani conflict as well. And I'm joined by my two wonderful co-hosts, Aydan.
Hi everyone, welcome to our fifth meeting. My name is Aydan, I'm from Azerbaijan. Growing up in Baku in the aftermath of the First Karabakh War, it brought with it a lot of pain and feelings of injustice. With the recent war, there was an added element of more direct trauma, as I had members of my family living in Ganja that was affected heavily during the conflict. And today I'm here as one of the moderators of Bright Garden Voices because I really believe in the importance of bringing together regular people from Azerbaijan and Armenia and in shaping dialogue between these people to have their voices heard and to be able to really talk to each other and listen to each other. All the opinions that I might express are my own, and they don't aim to represent any group, state, or organization. Thank you. Arnold?
Hello, everyone. A very happy Easter, Orthodox Easter to everyone who celebrates today. I am Arnold, I am Armenian, and I am joining from the United States. I'm only a moderator in this program, and if I express any views, I'm only representing myself and not any nation or group or organization. The wounds and losses of the recent war are still very fresh, especially for Armenians. On top of that, there is the ongoing POW crisis. It is not in spite of all of this, but in my opinion, because of this difficult post-war situation that ordinary people from both sides deserve to have their voices heard. Diego.
So today's meeting, as you might have seen, is titled Deportations and Pogroms. And the South Caucasus has historically been a diverse and interconnected region where Armenians, Azerbaijanis, Georgians, and other ethnicities live side by side throughout the continuous reshaping of borders and countries. In the late 80s, tensions were rising, and the minorities of Armenians and Azerbaijanis living in each other's republics became increasingly vulnerable and eventually were forced to flee their familial homes, never able to return again. The deportations and pogroms of Azerbaijanis and Armenians are well known, but we don't often get to hear the voices of those who went through these events. We wanted to bring forth voices that went through these traumatic events to share their stories to audiences on both sides that might have never heard of them before and learn more about them. So this is the topic of today's meeting, and we'll introduce our guest in a second. We'll go first with the agenda with Arnold.
Great. So our agenda. Actually, this is our first meeting with 4 guests in this project, and let's hope it just goes as smoothly as our previous meetings. We already had Diego introduce the project, and we, the moderators, introduced ourselves as well. Next, we will have a discussion with our guests. After this, we will open the virtual floor to the audience for questions. The audience may either forward their questions to the moderators, or they may ask the guests directly if they have their cameras and microphones turned on. We will end the meeting with a few closing remarks. Lastly, the meeting will be recorded and made available online. If you don't want your real name on record, you can use just your first name or a pseudonym. Now let us go to Aidan for the house rules.
As you can see on the screen, we have some basic house rules for all of our meetings that we kindly ask you to respect. In short, we don't tolerate insults, disrespectful language, generalizations about any ethnicity, denialism of trauma or events, and we call for you first and foremost to empathize and not to accuse. Every participant is the only one responsible for what they say and is not here to represent their government or nation. Remember, we are not here to agree with each other necessarily, and it's more than okay to disagree. We are simply here to listen to each other. And with that, I'd like to actually introduce our first two guests. From the Armenian side, we have Stanislav and Anna. I'll introduce Stanislav first. Stanislav is a lawyer from California. He was born in Baku in 1985, leaving to Moscow in 1988 when tensions against Armenians started to arise. He lived with his family in Russia for a couple of years until they moved to the US, settling down in Utah. Welcome, Stanislav. And we have Anna. Anna is a cancer researcher at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia and is pursuing her graduate degree. She was born in the US to an Armenian family originally from Baku, Azerbaijan. In order to escape the January 1990 pogroms, her family initially fled to Armenia. In 1992, her family obtained refugee status and were received by the US in a small town in Idaho. Welcome, Anna.
Great. Our next guest is Farid. Farid is a medical student in Turkey. He was born in Baku in 1995. Farid's relatives were forced to leave Armenia in late 1987 due to pogroms. He lived in Russia and then in Baku again before moving to Turkey for his studies. Welcome, Farid. Our next guest is Zaur. Zaur is a lawyer and a civil administrator in France, helping with the administrative issues of people seeking refuge or moving to France to start a new life. He was born in Yerevan in 1976 and had to leave Armenia in 1988 when he was 11 and a half years old. Zaur's family fled to Azerbaijan, and Zaur later moved to France to pursue his undergraduate studies, where he finally settled down and continues to reside to this day. Welcome, Zaur. Let's go to Aidan for the first question.
All right, our first question is to Anna. Anna, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your story as a refugee from the Baku pogroms?
Thank you. So a little bit about myself is my family originally came from Baku, and then I was actually born in the United States. So kind of my story is just based on what my family experienced and a little bit of just myself being, growing up as a refugee with my family kind of starting over. Initially, when my family was starting to try to get out of Azerbaijan, they went to Armenia first, but then there was an earthquake and my family wasn't able to find anywhere to really be taken in, and Armenia was kind of going through a hard time. So they were in limbo for a while, going back to Azerbaijan, waiting for some status to go either to Russia or to America. And then finally in the 90s, they were able to come to the United States.
Could you tell a bit about your family's life in Baku? And we see a picture that you shared with us. Could you tell a bit about that picture, maybe?
Okay, yes. So this photo is my aunt's wedding. I wanted to share it just because it kind of showed a big group of Armenians and other Azerbaijanis. My family was very close with other Jewish, Russian people. So it was kind of a really good mix, and just kind of showing that they had a really, good life while they were living there and a lot of fond memories. So yeah, that's that photo. And then I'll just kind of share a little story. Tell me if I'm going too long, but around the time when tensions started to kind of get heavy, my mom worked in the university. So at first, you know, she kind of thought we were protected. And it was one day when the director of the school pulled her out of class to say that there had been like a mob that came through and found out that there was still an Armenian professor teaching. And, you know, that was kind of the day where she knew like we had to get our family out of there. And a lot of like really good Azerbaijanis kind of helped protect us and helped get us out of there, along with some of my mom's Russian colleagues. But there was little moments like that where it was starting to like become clear that it was not, you know, especially safe for our family. And then another story is my two siblings, they were around 10 and 12. And my sister was going home on bus with like a bunch of other Armenians and other, you know, people. And the bus was pulled over by a mob, and they went through and took anyone with an Armenian passport or name out. Luckily, my sister at the time was able to speak both Russian and Azerbaijani, so she kind of passed off as being not Armenian and was able to kind of get away. So there's a lot of good, and my family talks really fondly of being in Baku and all of, you know, the mixed cultures and people, but at the very end it started getting a little bit scary and tense for them.
Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Zaur, let us go to you next. Would you tell us about how you and your family became refugees from Yerevan?
Hello to everyone. Yes, thank you. Well, you know, as I told already in my recollections about Armenia that I published it in France, and maybe you can find it. It's called article Je suis né en Armenia. I was born in Armenia. It's followed me on my family just suddenly, because the Soviet era, the post-conflict on beginning of century was hidden. It was not in unknown. Of course, my parents was in unknown, my father especially because he was a journalist, but I was completely unknown about all that stuff. Only thing I feel is that from very childhood, Armenians around me, children and comrades, they treated me as a Turk very oftenly. I didn't understand why. And when I asked, saying I'm not a Turk, I'm Azerbaijani, they were saying it's the same thing, and the bad thing, the same trash, let's say this way, but it was very, very bad, pejorative. And then in school was some classes, and periodically was coming up this question saying about the beginning century problem with Turkey, genocide, and asking Armenians about what's happened. They didn't knew even good their history. So one day, evening day, Sunday day, I think, in afternoon in a yard of my home where I was living, just the kids just tell us go home, don't come back. And when I came back my home apartment, my mother told me that 3 words, and the whole conflict began from these 3 words. She says they want Karabakh. So it was just something we don't know. I don't know what that means. We opened atlas and pictures and maps, and we seen that Karabakh is inside of Azerbaijan and surrounds Azerbaijan. And also we define there is a Nakhchivan, and in many republics that was exist, it's kind of borders that was made. So the conflict begins this way, and then get one exponential escalation, problems in school, problems in yard. I've been beaten with my brother, injured, and we left final Armenia on May 26, 1988. And my father came back actually to work there until December, and he lived in December also Armenia, but he lived with the last Azerbaijani comrades and compatriots with guard of Soviet troops. And in my point of view, the most tragic in this issue, that after, and I always was telling that after my father and this convoy, Russian Soviet soldiers convoy, no Azerbaijani could leave Armenia alive. So it was 217 Azerbaijani died. And I want to also mention that in my time, by 1988, was only 300 families less lived in Yerevan itself, while in beginning century it was more than 86%. The different figures, and that's the reason because of the border changes, because of all that stuff happened in the beginning century that the majority of people, simple people, was ignoring. So the conflict revealed all that things. And for me, it was very tragic because at 11 years old, it followed me. Then I could understand why was that difficulties with my comrades, with Armenians, why periodically, it was not only all the time, it was good fellowship, but from time to time I was in isolation in school, and I described it was very dramatic and traumatic for me.
Thank you for sharing these painful stories, Zaur. Thank you.
Ivan.
Yes, Stanislav, you were a little kid when your family left Azerbaijan. What's your story?
Thank you. Good to see everyone, and good morning, good evening to everybody. So like Aidan said, my name is Stan or Stanislav. My family is maybe I'm second generation born in Azerbaijan. All of my grandparents immigrated to Azerbaijan for various reasons. My maternal lineage is mostly Slavic, and my grandparents on one side, the grandfather that took this picture, he's Armenian. So my last name is from my dad, from my grandpa. My parents were born in Azerbaijan. I was born in Azerbaijan in 1985. It was really interesting from what I remember. I was obviously very young, but from what I remember, it was a neutral environment that I grew up. I think my parents did a really good job of shielding a lot of conflict. And I think part of that had to do with Russian being our first language. I didn't know differences between people. I didn't know differences between religions, ethnicities. It was kind of, one playground. And then, for whatever reason, maybe my parents always knew or anticipated something happening, but my mother kept her Slavic name. And eventually, what I would think would just be people, not based on ethnicity or cultural religion background, there were conflicts. And I remember, people throwing stones and people like doing kind of like basic like hooliganism. Like I never interpreted it as acts of hatred or aggression, but it was just something I thought people did because there are good people and there are bad people. I never was taught that there are, Armenian people and Azerbaijani people and Russian people. It was just some people do this and some people don't. But there were like little sparks of aggression and antagonism. My grandpa walked me to kindergarten every day. My classes, my teachers, from what I recall, my classmates, we spoke Russian. So again, Russian kind of neutralized the dynamic between, Armenians and Azerbaijanis. And then one day, my teacher told my parents that it probably isn't safe for me to be in school because there are people who kind of ask, what is your name? Where are you from? And, think bad things can happen. During this time, my aunt first left Azerbaijan, and my father would do a lot of flying between Azerbaijan and Moscow. And eventually, it got to the point where we had to leave, and we were given the opportunity to leave. At that point, you know, we had family to go stay with in Russia, in Moscow. And, you know, I was very young, so I was luckily spared a lot of the dramatics and trauma of this time period. But in talking to, you know, my mom, you know, I remember when, I forget the movie, but there's a movie with George Clooney where maybe Syriana. And my mom, you know, she said, watch this movie because this kind of conflict is very common from where you're from. And I, you know, I don't love George Clooney, so I wasn't really aware of what this movie is, but, you know, she told me a story of my father flying out of Baku to Moscow, and kind of, you know, these gangs of men patrolling, or I don't know what the right word, like a militia of people, you know, not government sanctioned, but people gathering together, banding together, and patrolling the airport and pulling people and, you know, taking them places. And for me, you know, growing up in the capital in Baku, again, I didn't know that there are certain kind of people. I just knew that there are wealthier people and there are poorer people. And that's kind of how I was taught that there's antagonism between humans. There are people who have something and there are people who don't have something, and people who don't have something want something, and people who have the something aim to get more of the, you know, collect the wealth and consolidate the wealth to some degree. So it was never a ethno-based perspective, but eventually my family left Azerbaijan and we stayed in Moscow. During that time in the Soviet Union, there was no such thing as migration. You had to have permission to live in, you know, even in a city within, you know, within a country, within Russia. You can't just move to the capital. So we were living in Moscow kind of without documentation, I guess. And my uncle immigrated or got refugee status to the United States. And eventually my family applied for refugee status and we were granted asylum in the United States. We moved to Utah, and moving to Utah, I really, again, didn't know that kind of human division. I knew there are people who are from America and there are people not from America. So again, I was shielded from a lot of this conflict, but eventually, you know, as you meet more immigrants, as you meet immigrants and refugees from other parts of the world, you kind of realize that everyone comes to the United States and everyone leaves their home country for various reasons. I always thought of myself as moving from Russia, and that's because I don't speak the language of Azerbaijan. I don't know the religion of Azerbaijan. But it was really funny because, you know, meeting other Russian people in the United States, the food that we would eat, I realized was not Russian food. It was a lot of barbecue and a lot of meat that my father would cook and a lot of dishes that my mother would make. And I just thought this is generic food. And then when I would meet other Russian people, I realized that there's so much more nuance and layer to all of this. But I was really lucky because I guess maybe growing up in a mixed household myself, there was never, the identity was that just we are in Baku, we speak Russian, and we're moving to Moscow. I think I was too young to really understand the context and the reason for it all. You know, great, I'm not going to school anymore. It's lovely. I wasn't a big fan of kindergarten. I really wanted to be home with my family. So a lot of these things were kind of rolled over and washed over me without as much impact as for other people. But this is a picture of me. I don't really remember much of Azerbaijan itself. But my grandpa really liked taking pictures, and I remember I don't know the name of this park, but on the back of this photo, it's dated 1988. So we left somewhere in 88, 89, when the conflicts got worse and worse. And then eventually I found myself in Utah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story, Stan.
So our last guest for the first question is Farid. Farid, You were born after your family had left Armenia. Can you tell us a little bit about their story, please?
Hi, my name is Farid. As you said, I was born after the conflict of the First Karabakh War, so I will tell the experience of my relatives. You know, before the conflict, during the Soviet times, pre-1980s, there actually wasn't many problem between in the region between the two nations. Maybe because our village was 100% populated by the Azerbaijanis, so in ordinary day they didn't saw any Armenian. You know, when they were going to the city Sisian, then they were interacting with Armenians, but in ordinary life in the village there were no Armenian. Although that village, Ardu village, the name of the village was Ardu, now it was renamed to Akhitu, was the closest to the city center. There were some other villages like that, which was 100% populated by the Azerbaijanis, mixed or 100% populated by the Armenians in that region. Before the conflict, pre-1980s, there was not a problem, but during the 1980s, as you know, the rise of nationalism, the end of the collapse of the USSR and stuff, everything just affected the whole region, and then the people of our village, you know, they started heard the rumors that that they will be kicked out, or the nearby, you know, Armenians, nations Armenians said that we don't want you here and stuff like that. If you don't leave, we will do like threatening and stuff like that. So, but they couldn't come to force them to leave because, as I said before, the village was 100% Azerbaijanis. So they were making trouble outside of the village. For example, they like there was an incident in the bus, Baku Sisian bus. That bus was when that bus was passing through the town of Goriz. They some nationals, local Armenians, they just stopped the bus and then they beat it. You know, the 6 of our villages, and one of them, which Pashaev Isa, as I'm not mistaken, his name was, he died. Yeah, there was one death during the pogroms, only one death. Yeah, there were some problems. So this even forced, you know, my relatives to leave the Armenia, because of course they were not feeling safe. But of course there were not good, but like some Armenians that helped us to, you know, for example, one of them, one local Armenian, his name was Mamigon. He was from the Ust village of the Sisian. He helped one of my relatives' daughter to hide from the nation's Armenians for a week in his car, and he hid them in his house, and then he made them out of the Armenia, you know, to Nakhchivan. So that there is also good examples, of course, but yeah, and all of this happened in 1987, in late 1987. In the beginning, in the January of 1988, there were only 3 Azerbaijanis left in our village, and at that time they couldn't, you know, to flee via bus, via car, because it was too late. It was 1988, and so they flee by the foot. I still know them by person. I interviewed them how they managed to escape. They said that we walked for a week to the town of Lachin. They passed the mountains to the Lachin, and then they managed to escape, and they were the last Azerbaijanis in the region. And right now we're checking, you know, the village via the satellite images. from the Google Earth or from the videos on the YouTube, what has changed in the village, what hasn't changed. And surprisingly, to this day, almost nothing changed in the village. Every house stays the same, except they renovated the school there. And so it's actually really weird that the village stays the same. So that's it.
Thank you, Farid. We'll go to Anna again now. Anna, as a refugee in the US, you grew up among other refugees from Azerbaijan. Did you encounter more Azerbaijanis during your life? And what were those experiences like?
Thank you. Yeah, growing up, we kind of had like a circle of other refugees that also came from Baku, most of them Armenian. But around 2005, we had a family come that were from Azerbaijan. The husband was Azerbaijani and his wife was Armenian. And it was when their two kids started going to school and then started getting a little uncomfortable with their daughters being asked, you know, what are they? And so there was similar situation to Stan. And so they decided to come. I don't know how they ended up in Idaho as well, but when they did, the refugee center had remembered a lot of our families that had come in the early 90s. So they contacted us and asked if, you know, we could help with interpreting and things like that. And I remember everybody in the community came together. We went to the airport to, you know, welcome them because they were coming into a completely foreign place. Everybody came together, got them a car, found them an apartment, kind of helped get them settled. And then, you know, just after they settled in, they just kind of became a part of our community. And that was my, you know, first real introduction to someone that's from Azerbaijan, not, you know, part of our refugee groups. There was a lot of mixed families and that was normal. I never thought anything of it. I had, you know, people my age, the kids, and they were half and half. And, you know, I think one of them, their dad had passed away. And so I never knew that they were, you know, not Armenian, and it didn't really make a difference. And also my aunt, when she was in Baku, her and her husband were looking to have a kid and couldn't, and had a student who was giving their kid up for adoption, and they ended up adopting this Azerbaijani boy. And so it was not a big deal in my family. It never felt separated. So I never had any issues. And I also never knew there was really any issues because my family shielded me from really why we ended up in America. And I didn't really ask because I was so young. But just those experiences kind of showed me that there wasn't any real issue with meeting anyone from Azerbaijan. And it wasn't only until this conflict now that I realized there were some Azerbaijanis and Armenians who don't quite get along. And I haven't, you know, before, if I would meet anyone from there, I would kind of just be like, oh my gosh, my family is from Baku, like we play so much in common. I never, you know, thought anything of it. But after the conflict, I started kind of worrying, like, if I meet someone from Azerbaijan, are they going to be like uncomfortable if I say, you know, we're Armenian? But most of our experiences in the US have been very positive, and I feel like we do have a lot in common. So has not really been an issue for us.
Thank you, Anna.
Zaur, let us go back to you. You lived in Armenia until you were 11 and a half years old. Would you share with us one positive and one negative experience you've had living as an Azerbaijani in Yerevan?
Yes, thank you very much, Arnold. You know, it's very amazing because when you asked me this question, I found some pictures. You can see my photo. It just, I think, 1 year before beginning a conflict. It's my school in Yerevan. And you see I'm just here, okay? So, and when you ask about the positive experience, I made some total recall, because in my down in my mind, I was thinking about which is the most positive experience I have, and I found one. The point is that the year, I think before that, 2 years before that, at the age I 8, I think, so it was some kind of second, third class in Russian school. There was a theater, piece of theater that they want made at school. And it was very amazing because I was chosen to make a main role in that piece. And it was very amazing. It was some kind of 2 hours, and I was chosen to be a main. The piece name was the Sultan with a stone launcher. Okay, it was just kind of fiction story about bad school boy, which found a magic stone launcher, and then making hostages all his professors, and his friends became servitors, etc. But the years after, when I came to Baku, and when you ask again this question, I was recollecting this, and I am thinking it's strange because the name of piece was Sultan, and it was some kind of vice versa, Sultan Turk, or Turk Azeri. So I was chosen like to be a Sultan. But it was very amazing, a good experience, because it was a total success. The director, deputy director of school, asked it to place it 2 times, and it was it was not so big school, it was not so good, just for example, it was not a special place to make a theater, big amphitheater, so make it in a physical training, big, it was huge but not so big, but in physical training place. So it was 2 times, and it was amazing because it was 2 or 3 school table, put one on another, and I was on the top, and I have some kind of chalma on my head, and it was just kind of a real sultan. And I was, it was in Russian, of course, and I was recollecting by heart my role, and my comrades too. I think it was I was not while I'm thinking about it, I was not a best. I have was a very good schoolboy, good mark at school, but I probably maybe was not a best one. Maybe in Russian, I have advantage because my mother is Russian language and literature teacher, but they could choose another guy, but they choose me to being a sultan. And the negative experience, as I told already, and I wrote it in my recollection, it was as a day which is very affect me. It was that the conflict was going exponentially, and somehow we made some kind of mistake, was not thinking that we'll go that far, but me and my brother go to the yard to play, and in that moment the boys from our yard, when we was living in the center of city, attacked us, and in that moment we was beaten, and I have some cicatrices on my arm because the nail, the bone with the nail was, I was beaten with a bone with a nail, and nail entered in my arm. So it was a negative experience. But what's happened afterwards, which my mother saw that scene, she came down to protect us. It was unbelievable scene. I was speaking fluently Armenian. Actually, it's my first language. But then I forgot, of course, because I had to study Azeri from very beginning at 11 and 5.5 in Baku. But I still can say, understand a little bit Armenian, and can say several phrases. And the phrase was, it was unbelievable scene, and I always compare these that with the Schindler List scene, because it was the same thing from all balconies and all windows of our building was living. The neighbors was jumping, and some throwing away the things on us. It was apples or tomatoes or whatever, and was crying. This is two Armenian phrase I never forget. Iramung chunes, and Iramung chunes in Armenian was linked. You don't have right to live here. It's just a phrase. Don't have right. And I remember, just by the way, in the beginning, I know that in audience it's mere Armenians, and for my Armenians, former compatriots, Barevzes, who say good day to you, hello for you. So that was very traumatic, and for many years after, I was always remembering that. And afterwards, when I knew that 217 Azerbaijanis died in Armenia, I was thinking that was very lucky, because that could finish really badly, because local police, milice, at the time Soviet milice, was not able to protect us. And several times was meetings even in front of our apartment home, saying, asking us to leave. And the police was only coming to say, my parents, when did you think to leave very soon? Did you find an apartment in Baku? It was only concerned to police to make us leave. And the only thing we were waiting for, it was just my examination. When I passed my examinations of 5th class, the next day we leave. And also is the same, to explain or dramatic on this situation. I had also with us my grandmother, which was very, very old, I think something 85 in that time. And she got sick, so we was not able to get medicine to apartment, because the people, our neighbors actually, was blocking the entry. So police came, it was negotiation, and finally when say she's 80 years old, 85, so someone say, and they let medicine. So these two kind of experience, one positive and negative, deeply printed in my mind. I think I will never forget this.
Thank you, Zaur. And can you tell us a bit about this photo in front of the school? The photo in front of the school.
A photo. It's usually we did it also in France, in any country. So it's an annual photo when we're doing every year, okay? And well, now with they doing that in photo with professional photographer, who's coming. I think maybe it was also a photographer, but we have to think several things on this picture. First, we have to see school. Which school is that? So we see school number 182. It's written in Armenian and in Azeri. Then the photograph, they put in 3 yards, in 3 row, the children, so which is so high, in the last one, and I'm in the middle, and the little boys and girls, which is not so big, they in the first yard. And it's very important. It's of course is a class matter in the middle. It's a principal, we say, teacher of the class, curator of our class, and which is very important. You can see all of us have a red scarf, which is a sign of pioneer young Soviet children, as a Scout movement, but it's communist, young communists. And I have another picture I shared with you, but maybe you can share or not. It was a ceremony to get in pioneer, because it's very selective. But by this year, I think we are 10 all. By 10 years old, all class became a pioneers. So it was really dictated by the Soviet time, because it's Soviet time. It should be school. We have to show that it's Soviet, with a red pioneer scarf, and it was a mise en scène with 3 rows, and show it's an annual picture, and also name of the school.
So are you wearing in the dark suit in the middle bottom?
I'm just here. Yeah,
there you are. Yeah. Interesting. And your parents also were involved in this school, I believe you said.
No. My mother was a teacher in a only Azerbaijani school in Yerevan. Was a Fatah Akhundov school. She was fine job there. She tried also work in different organizations, public Armenian organizations in other school, but it was difficult. My recollection, she told me that first they gave affectation very far from Yerevan to the border with Nakhchivan and with Azerbaijan village, and it was impossible to every day doing two way. And my father was a journalist, a political journalist in only Azerbaijani newspaper in Yerevan, Soviet Armenistani, Soviet Armenia. And so he was a nomenclature worker. That's why he was, of course, he was in a known what's happened. And when conflict began, he told me many things, especially what's happened in the beginning century. And also he told me the testimony of Armenians came from Turkey. So he was very in a known what's happened. He was in a known of treaties, of Kars Treaty. And he was in other statue in Armenia, he was speaking fluently Armenian. And I remember one day was very tension in a yard, and many men came. It won't maybe harm him, beating him. and he's speaking with them a perfect Armenian, and he told me afterwards that he told them that we have to stop what you're doing because nothing good will come out from this, and explain and giving for several examples, not only war and casualties, but he also told, remember, Azerbaijan is living here from a very long time, and borders have been changed. That part of Azerbaijan is living near Sevan, Zangezur, and Yerevan. But if you let them, force them to go, who will doing agriculture in Armenia? And that's true, because I visited several times with my family near Lake Sevan, that plantations, that Azeri was occupying, for example, they was doing a zucchini, okay, and another plants, eggplants, and it was all delivered to Yerevan to the market. So what's happened, that kind of part of population leave. That's why I think it was very, very interesting, very important.
Thank you, Zaur. Thank you, Zaur, for sharing that.
We'll go back to Stanislav. Stanislav, you've mentioned to us already as well a little bit that you weren't aware you were Armenian, nor why you had to leave Azerbaijan. Would you tell us, please, a little bit about this and how your self-identification developed?
Yeah, so you know, I was saying the first time that we grew up in a Russian-speaking household, so I knew that my grandpa is Armenian. I knew that I never heard him speak Armenian. I knew he had family member. Well, later on, I learned he had family members in St. Petersburg in Russia. But growing up, I mean, like I said, it was a Russian-speaking household. And my grandfather, he had a very, you know, my last name has been Russified for reasons relating to the conflicts of, you know, of this region. And my grandpa, who's Armenian, has like the most Russian name possible. And whenever I would ask why, you know, in school, you know, the teachers start to ask you, you know, what's your name? And, you know, why did your parents name you this? And draw a family tree, these kind of like very basic questions of family history. You know, I remember in elementary school in Utah, you know, one of our teachers, like our homework assignment was to write about your name. Why did your parents choose this name? And so kind of like, you know, I think my parents said they just didn't know anyone with, or there was maybe a singer with, I don't know. It was a very not interesting story about why my name is my name, my first name. But I asked, you know, why does my grandpa have this very typical Russian name, which my brother was named after my grandpa? And, you know, the answer I got was that my grandpa was born the year of the revolution. I was told the year of the Russian Revolution. And so he had a Russian name because the Soviet Union was founded or created, whatever. And he was in the Red Army. He was in World War II. I feel like in the Soviet Union, everyone had a World War II story. And so for me, the identity that my grandpa carried was kind of that of a soldier in the Red Army. So it was, again, not tied to Armenia. It was, you know, not necessarily tied to Russia, but it was kind of like he was, you know, whatever the Soviet government message was, is that, you know, we are all friendship, one people, etc. And I would hear my grandparents, you know, talk about, you know, the friendship of the USSR, my grandmother's, how, you know, eventually as the USSR started collapsing, you know, the tensions rose, and that kind of inter-ethnic friendship, you know, whether that was government messaging or reality, I don't know, but like, you know, the sense of nationalism and the sense of national identity in the USSR grew as the Soviet regime deteriorated. And so we never had like a discussion of you're this and you're that, and this is this and this is that. I just knew, you know, my name, you know, actually my first name, Stanislav, is a Polish name, I think. So we never really had like this push to create a national identity in our household. But when we moved to Utah, you know, the neighborhood I grew up in, luckily, was all immigrant. I had Russian-speaking friends, I had Spanish-speaking friends, I had Vietnamese-speaking friends. If you were English-speaking as your native language, that was kind of the minority. So again, my world was shaped in the dynamic of, are you from the US or are you not from the US? And as I learned and met other people from various parts of the world, the question of like, well, where are you from became more and more normal. And I remember being very young in elementary school, my parents asking me if I wanted to go to Armenian school. I think there was actually a Greek, I don't know where it was held, but in Utah, in Salt Lake City, there are a lot of Greeks. And I feel like maybe there was like some Armenian program affiliated or held at some cultural center. And it was very like optional. My parents, you know, said, do you want to do this? Do you want to, it was mostly kind of like an after school, you know, recreational league. And there's an element of language and history, but mostly it was like, do you want to go play with your friends who go to do this thing? And I said no, because, you know, I guess I never really liked going to school much, but I didn't want to, you know, sign up for more homework. And the idea of like national identity was again very foreign to me. And I remember actually learning that there are different types of Russians even, or different types of Slavic people. And some people are Jewish and some people are Muslim and some people are Christian and some people are, you know, Christian, but they don't really do the church things that define you as a Christian or whatever. And I remember visiting Russia one time, and I traveled to St. Petersburg, where my grandpa had a sister, or has family. And that's kind of when I started, now looking back, I kind of see, you know, perhaps what they were trying to engender in me, because, you know, they would show me like, look, this is an Armenian church, or this is, you know, this. And I really didn't have that conceptualization of, you know, what is Armenian and what is not. I don't know, you know, my grandpa is not around, so I don't know, for whatever reason, you know, like I can suspect why, but Armenian wasn't really taught in the home. I mean, my name has been de-Armenianized and Russified because of that political ethnic tension. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity to learn Armenian things and to do, you know, to do that kind of stuff. But I remember in middle school being at a friend's house, and, you know, all the adults are upstairs and you're kind of playing around, and we were in our older, like my friend's older brother, and we like found a journal where he was talking about the Armenian genocide. And I never, you know, that was not taught to me by either of my parents, by my grandparents. It was kind of like an event that happened and that people didn't want to harp on because, you know, for the traumatic reasons, for the geopolitical reasons, it was not something that people in my family wanted to discuss, even though, like, now that I think of it, I mean, how my grandpa got to Azerbaijan is not because he decided that, or his family decided that that's where they would want to live. You know, it wasn't an option for them. But, you know, I remember asking my parents, like, what is this event that I read about? Like an American taught it to me, or it was presented from a family friend. So it was kind of like, you know, these are your friends and their kids are talking about this. What is this? And my parents, you know, they were always like, you know, that's for later. You'll learn about that when you're later, when you're older. And I was a history major in college. And so, you know, in the era of George Bush, you know, the idea of being Russian kind of became, I really wanted to go back to Russia. So I got my citizenship in 2013, and I got my US passport to be able to go back to Russia. And it was the first time I left the United States. And it was kind of, I wanted to see a part of my history, my genetic history, my cultural history, etc. And I kind of made it, I put a list in my head of all of the countries, where are my family members from, and what are those histories? And, I wanted to see as much of Russia as possible. And Azerbaijan, is where I'm from. I would never tell people I'm Azerbaijani because we had to leave Azerbaijan. And the idea of like being from somewhere to me is like, that is your home. And, this picture is also 1988 from that same day in the park. Like Baku is where I'm from, but it can't really be my home because I'm not allowed to go there. And so the idea of being from Azerbaijan was telling people I'm from Azerbaijan was more confusing than productive. Especially for people in the United States, if you're from somewhere, but you're not of that country, it was just confusing. So I tell people I'm from Russia and kind of leave it at that. But as I travel to Russia, my goal now is to visit the other side of my family's history, and that's Armenia. So my identity was kind of shaped by learning that immigrants who come to the United States, it's not just your union. I realized that there are people who left their home for various reasons, and it's not just being American or not American, which I guess is, a huge privilege and a huge luxury to not be able to have to dissect that kind of division. And kind of what Anna mentioned, in this last conflict, I've traveled through Turkey on the way to different countries, and I've met, when the TSA agent looks at your passport, and my passport says Azerbaijan, Baku, and my mom has been able to go back to Azerbaijan, and she's gone to our family home, and she describes how things have changed and how names have been rewritten and how cemeteries have been altered. So the idea of being Armenian kind of was shaped by looking at, how are people identifying themselves in the United States to some degree. And, I don't know, I never wanted to, I had friends, like I mentioned, this friend who wrote in the journal, who were very vocal about certain things when it comes to Azerbaijan and when it comes to Turkey. And I never wanted to, or adversarial setting, but as this conflict in 2000, this war in 2020 grew, and the aftermath and the current situation, it's kind of hard to ignore that this is, the city that I'm from is engaged in a conflict and a war with a country or with a culture that my family members are from. And it's hard to ignore that. So it kind of like, has inspired, and, I try to support Armenian businesses and share with my friends what this country means. But, I think identity in the United States is a complicated question. And I'm lucky to confront my sense of identity as as an immigrant, as a refugee person in the United States. It's probably a much easier job than people who are living there and having to deal with that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Stan. Aydin.
Right, the next question is to Farid. Farid, could you please tell us a little bit about your family's experience interacting with Armenians after they moved to Baku?
To be honest, there wasn't too much of an interaction. Of course, naturally, in Azerbaijan, there wasn't too many Armenians left. But during but at the time of the late 1980s, 1988, the one Armenian family take a refuge in my grandma's house. And they stayed there for a week approximately, and then my grandma and my uncle helped them to get away from the country to Russia. I don't know what happened to that family after that. And I hope that they're fine. You know, I don't know what's happened to them. Other than that, in Baku, my family and I met some Armenians. Actually, I saw 3 Armenians in Baku. One of them actually, she was a really old, a woman, like at least 65 years old. She was a street sweeper or cleaning the streets or whatever. And yeah, and I noticed that my family, my mom, my other relatives, you know, they were helping that woman financially, materially. And I asked that why are you doing it, and they said that she's Armenian, and please don't tell anyone, you know, because we don't want anyone to know that she is Armenian, to not get her in trouble. There were like these kind of things, but I believe her name was Lena. She has a Russian name, and I was really surprised that she was an Armenian. And I've never seen her for 5 or 6 years, and I think that she passed away. And yeah, and I had one interaction with an Armenian in Turkey. I had a neighbor, Armenian neighbor. We had actually a really good relationship, but he didn't know that I was Azerbaijani. So one day when he was, you know, talking with a phone in Russian, I interfered in Russian and made a joke, something I don't remember. And then he asked, how you know the Russian language, where are you from? And I said that I'm Azerbaijani. And then he was awaiting me at all his costs. You know, when I was in an elevator, he wasn't, you know, he was climbing the stairs to avoid me to be with me in the same elevator. I don't know why. Yeah, I had a really short experiences. Like, I mean, my family as well. I hadn't had like a normal conversation with them, so I don't think that my family and I, after the conflict, after the 1988, after the pogroms, we had any experience with Armenians. So actually, there is nothing to say.
Thanks, Farid.
All right, Stanislav, let us go back to you. Do you believe the pogroms and deportations are a closed chapter, or is there still closure needed? What would you personally expect or like to see regarding refugees like yourself and your family?
Well, the first part of that question, do you believe it's a closed chapter? I mean, I would say no. There's just a war that happened, so it's unfortunately not a closed chapter. You know, I mentioned traveling through Turkey in the last question. In my passport, it says Azerbaijan, and I look at my name and Sarkisov, that's, you know, it's Sarkisian. I know, you know, that name is not Russian. And I was actually really worried how the TSA agents and the airport officials would react to my passport. It was just a layover in Istanbul. And I mean, even the fact that like traveling through Turkey kind of gave me pause and concern was kind of like, to me, would suggest the answer is no. I was very surprised that the agents didn't really pick up and register that as an Armenian name. And I don't know if it's because my passport says USA on it, or because, you know, they see my flight is headed towards California. But I don't think this chapter is closed. I mean, I'm not allowed to go to where I'm from. And I think if it was a closed chapter, then there would be free travel, there would be government recognition and bilateral relations between these countries, between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and Armenia and Turkey. So I wish it was closed. I wish, you know, people can move on, but I don't think you can move on until you acknowledge and resolve. And forgetting, you know, people generations are dying and there are new people, and these conflicts, there are people being born today who don't know these conflicts. But unfortunately, my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, is that what's happening in Azerbaijan today and what the president of Azerbaijan is doing is not a form, or is not doing anything to reconcile these differences. It's in fact to engender further division. I mean, with museums glorifying, I understand, I'm an attorney. I understand people have two sides to every story. I understand that, there's opinions and etc. But in law, you're always, the judge always asks you, have you met and conferred? Have you picked up the phone and called the other side? Have you tried to make any inroads towards resolving an issue? And resolving an issue means sitting down and working it out and talking it through. And I don't think that's, there is no meeting and conferring. There is no resolution. There is no talking. There is no diplomatic relationships between these countries. So I don't think this chapter can be closed until that happens. And what do I want? I don't really want much. I would love to say I would like to visit Baku. So, the question of, would I be happier if I was allowed to go back to this country? I don't think it would be, as long as there's this government in place that does certain things. I mean, like, I try to spend my money consciously and put my money into businesses and corporations and places that I think represent values that I share. And even if I was allowed to travel to Azerbaijan, I mean, I think it would be nice, and it would be interesting to see this country, to see, like, personally, to go to this park, to see where my family and my parents lived. I mean, I remember, like, certain images of, like, taking baths and doing these things, and it would be fun to go and visit those places. Every time I go to Utah, I still, I drive through the apartment complex that we lived in, and it's not because, like, there's a sight to see. It's just kind of a nice thing to go back to where you lived. But I don't have any demands of Azerbaijan, and I don't really, my only demand would be for people to know the history of their countries, to know the history of their politics. And it's not for my personal benefit. I don't want anything from Azerbaijan. I don't need anything from Azerbaijan, but I'm in a different position. I don't need any material support. I don't need any recognition. I am safe. I am fine here in the United States. So I don't really need anything from them, except for perhaps, and I understand, living in a government that operates on repression, that operates on fear. And I think, unfortunately, the government of Azerbaijan does do that. The government of Russia does that. Whenever, most governments, a lot of governments do that. The government of the United States does that. When you see there are caravans of people who are flooding your country, when governments operate on fear to trigger their citizens and their residents' fear, that is a loss for everybody. And I really think that, the people of Azerbaijan and the people of Armenia, all people want the same thing, and that is to live peacefully and prosper. So, what do I want? I want people to realize their histories and to learn their histories. But if their governments don't allow them to do that, I recognize that that's a big struggle. So, again, I don't want anything. I hope that, people can learn and can see that a lot of times conflict is manufactured, conflict is politicized, and there's a reason that happens. To some degree, you see it in the United States. When there's trouble, you create social issues to move people and to mobilize people, and emotions mobilize people more easily. And so, I hope that the government of Azerbaijan can demobilize people, and that would be my only request. If I can wave a wand and make a wish come true, it would be for people to have peaceful governments everywhere. Not just in Azerbaijan, not just in, but worldwide. I mean, like, I don't, that's kind of like the sad thing is that, you know, this regional conflict in the United States is kind of not well known, is oftentimes overlooked. But whenever there is a conflict anywhere in the world, it pushes immigration, it creates, you know, it creates stress for the whole planet. And I hope that we can just know that there are people involved in all of these issues, and you know, yeah.
Thank you, Stanislav. Diego, let's go to you.
Zaur, same question to you. Do you believe the pogroms and deportations are a closed chapter, or is there still closure needed? What will you personally expect or like to see regarding refugees like yourself or your family?
Yes, thank you, Diego, for this question. Well, I am agree by principle with Stan about that it's not closed chapter. Of course, every one of us has different maybe vision. We can differ, but in my point of view, there is maybe 2 or 3 fundamental things. First, the statute of refugees, of the people. I mean, you know, before I was a refugee studying in Baku, I integrating, and then I came, as you mentioned, to France, and then I studied, had a chance to study here law. And my vision now, I've been choosing a public law. My vision is dealing with more with this vision of things. I'm legalist because I want to apply legal principles. So if we're going through this, of course, in this situation now, actually, for example, between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and especially what's happened in Nagorno-Karabakh, that the new realities came. The sooner or less or later, the conflict will be settled, and the question will become about the droit de sol, life to live, and the status of the people there. Okay, so, and of course there's a principle in the law, we can reconstruct the past. So that means the people was originally living there, they have right to remain, and their children's too. So the same kind with me, with my compatriots, with Farid, etc., and of course with Stan and with Anna. So because their parents was living, and it's a fundamental thing in the law, because this right to live in being a citizen of a country or having a permit to stay, it's transferred to their children. So unless this is not settled, we can't say that that conflict is solved. So I know, unfortunately, the position of Armenian government, actual Armenian government, which considers this 280,000 Azerbaijanis lived in 1988 Armenia as a gastarbeiters, okay, is a theory that these people somehow came to work in Armenia and work finished, so they leave. So I think with this point of view, we can go forward. The main point, nevertheless, the main point to solve the conflict, as I told in our preliminary meeting, that the thing is shocking for me especially is that from 105 years, we are already in a third conflict between our 2 nations. Okay, there is a similarities we can find with the European experience. For example, France or Germany was several times in a war for a given region, but now it's settled. And the people are having friendships and mixed couples, and there's no situation of war or hate between 2 countries. I think that the most important things dealing with nationalism itself. Unfortunately, in my practice, I met a lot of Armenians from very many regions, especially coming from Armenia. And so there's difference from Armenians coming from Armenia or coming from Baku or coming from Karabakh. And unfortunately, I have to say that in private, many Armenians told me that they're against that escalation of conflict, they against Dashnakhtutun, they against the hate and xenophobia against Azerbaijanis, and even there's some of them that have much more progressive vision, saying that have to be settled with an international law, with the right to people to live in a country, having their culture, their schools, whatever, but respecting the laws of the country of host country where it's living. But none of them can have a courage to say that publicly. and they tell me in private, because even when I talking, we can make a video on YouTube, or we can make some program like this, some kind of debate. All of them tell me that they're scaring for their lives, scaring from their compatriots, and this the situation of scaring is preventing us to go forward to achieve true peace. I also posed a lot of question to me. When I came to Baku, I asked myself how it came that I found myself in Armenia. Why? And why my father are from there, and his parents, and my mother actually originally from Baku, and she get wedding to Yerevan. So when I studied history, as Stan told, we have to study history of our countries, of general history, and I even through the war over past months, I make some conference with Zoom with our scientific association, and make presentation to my competitors and other people to came to listen me about different stages of history, about First War in beginning of 2nd century, about Khojali genocide, what we happened massacres, and about all that different aspects. And first I did it for understand how I find myself in Armenia, and now I know very well history of that region, and I know what's happened in beginning century. And as I already wrote, and it's something I publish it's public opinion I made on Twitter, I think the great powers are directly responsible for our pain. I told already in debates when I was intervening in France, on RT France with Armenians, about kind of issues, those issues. I told that the tragedy of our people, the tragedy, the Armenian tragedy of beginning of century, and now what's happened, it's all leads to one the same thing: the play of great powers. In beginning century, Stan told about genocide. I wrote in my work for master degree that the events happened in Western Anatolia, Armenians called Armenian genocide, and Turkish calls that massacres. But the events linked with Azerbaijan in our region only is the extent that what's happened in Eastern Anatolia lead to massacres also in Eastern, what they called then Eastern Armenia, which before was Azerbaijani Khanates, and they came to Baku. So it's like a wave, destructive wave, come to Baku and blow us to the war, the civil war. Of course, the casualties of the beginning century, maybe someone can say it's relatives, but there's massacres in Zangezur, and there's massacres in Baku. So, and the Soviet era, the fragile equilibrium of totalitarian construction fixed it. And what I tell in beginning of my speech today, that we forget, we was forced to forget, and the conflict revealed all that thing. So I think the great powers, whosoever, each country which signed the treaty, because several treaties were signed. It's the Kars Treaty, we know the authors, we know the signatories, and the Lausanne Treaty also. So all that countries, and especially countries of Entente, Russia, France, United Kingdom, they bear, and Turkey, of course, modern Turkey, and of course, Azerbaijan and Armenia, and in some extent also the Iran, but it's less extent. But all that countries bear the heavy responsibility between people of Caucasus, because what's happened today, it's the consequences of the great place in the beginning century, great plans of Entente to destroy Ottoman Empire, to dismiss it, to put it in several pieces, and unfortunately, my competitors, my Armenian competitors at the beginning centuries, they believed that tale, they get involved in, and after was too late, and they led to tragedy for all of us. That lead us to hate, then lead us to 3 wars in 105 years. Of course, we can't force France or Great Britain or even Russia do whatever we want, but we can tell the truth. And I think telling the truth can settle a lot of things. I'm told in my debate, and I told today to all Armenians listening to me, I told that also on RT France, I told these 3 words in Armenia: Hayere, sanctins. Listen to me, Armenians. I think have to have a courage today to raise our voices, and in each country saying against nationalists, to telling all the truth, and to try to establish the good relations each which is other. I told already that there is another factor which is not very important. It's a role of diaspora. Unfortunately, diaspora overseas, Armenian diaspora played a very negative role. Had all that huge influence to Armenia, to Armenian policy, domestic policy that lead to today's, the last war, of course, and last conflict. And my hope, my deep hope, that with communications that will open between two countries, with economical ties will come through the Armenia, modern Armenia will benefit from it and will be less dependent from what we call in this term now toxic diaspora, and will go through and develop. And the people, the ordinary Armenians, will lose their fear between in front of Dashnak Tutun, in front of whatever, and will tell truth and will go through. Of course, I also can say that both countries suffered, and Stan told about Azerbaijani government. Azerbaijani government, unfortunately, have to do what establishment and the people want. And my point of view that this war, it's bring us back, maybe not to 30 years, but I mean, for Azerbaijan, it's for sure for 15 years back, because with the resources we had, we found with development, we could go much more forward and much more prosperous that we were now. The conflict for both countries being aside the casualties and the losses, bring us a lot of sufferance and suffers a lot of that's it hate. That's an image of historical enemy, which is probably should not be. And I think the same thing between Armenia and Turkey. Okay, I told many times to Armenian, if you have a problem with Turkey, you have to negotiate and discuss with Turkey, and probably we can find a solution, because there is a solution, especially on different levels. But in my point of view, what's happened that Azerbaijan became, unfortunately, it's like French expression, bouc émissaire, that the one we can deal on, one we can revenge on. So it's my point of view, what I lived in Armenia, that Turkey was a huge country, NATO member, and at that time, even when I was asking what's the problem, the image I had in my childhood, that was a bad NATO anti-communist country, which is Turkey. Okay, it was presented this way, but no one told me that's a huge story and what's the difference and what's the role of Azerbaijan is inside. I studied and read many things, even in Armenian historiography, and I found only one thing. Armenians write that irregular Azerbaijani formation was participating. But if we see in the context of that epoch, of that time, about ethnic cleanings, about massacres in Zangezur, about the war was in Karabakh, of course, Azerbaijan is their plight, and that led to the war. So in my point of view, of course, we are on a 21st century. In 21st century, for me, it's maybe shocking to see how the people have to die for land or having the difference. I hope that will be settled. I hope that the war will never come back. But I want to tell to Armenians, aside also to my competitors, that we have a role to play. And I think the first role to play is to tell the truth, not scaring of consequences. If even some people, our friends, our activists, or whatever, can be angry on us, etc. So I think I hope a lot on programs like yours today and another one, that telling the truth, putting all the things on the table, we can negotiate, we can broke the abscess, and we can go through. Because otherwise, and I told already, and of course the ceasefire that now, which is settlement in Karabakh, have to prevail. The decentralization rules have to be applied, as I told in my debate, and the part of Nagorno-Karabakh under Russian control today have to be totally demilitarized. And then we have a choose, like in any democratic country, we live with the rules and constitution of host country, we respect the rule, and we have all the rules without any discrimination. We have a passport, we have a working permission, we have all rights, getting to university, having studying, having protection, and human rights. So aside this, the alternative is extremism of race, they will rearm Armenia and we will get another war, maybe much more destructive. So my point of view, that chapter is not closed and we have to role play for maybe not for us, but for our children, because I also want to go to Armenia one day to see the places when was my parents, grandparents' home, grave of my grandfather, if it's not destroyed yet. So, but it's even with French passport, I'm not sure. Like Stan told, I can go. But Stan, it's maybe you can ask Azerbaijani consulate. I think Azerbaijani authorities can guarantee your security. And it's happened many times. Armenians came to Baku, even pass on TV. Maybe I can't do that the same, but in an actual situation, because of what's happened, it's not possible. But I'm looking forward even to study and learn again Armenian. Remember Armenian, because one day I will go to Armenia and I will be need to talk to Armenians as my father did in that time and stop, and that war never come back again. Thank you.
Thank you, Zaur, for your point of view. Arnold?
Thank you. Farid, let's go to you again. How has the fact that your family comes from Armenia affected their and your outlook on the conflict, on coexistence, actually?
To be honest, it's changed, but it's not in a good way, because they're forced to leave their homes. I actually traced my ancestry. They were living there for almost, I don't know, 200, 300 years. So it's a little bit hard, to acknowledge the fact that they even cannot visit this village, So that's why it's a little bit. I don't think. I don't think that that the coexistence, or I don't know, the peace, or is possible in the near future, but maybe in a far future, but not in the near future. For example, I will give you an example. For example, in 1905 to 1920s, there were the war or massacres on both sides in the Zengezur, or in Syunik, as you call, or in Karabakh or Nakhchivan. And then the Soviets came in 1920s, and then there were peace. For 70 years, there were peace, and no one thought in our village that there will be a war again. Okay, they actually forgot, and during the Soviet times, the Azerbaijanis will call that you're Azerbaijanis, you're not Turks. Okay, so to distance the Caucasus from the Turkey, because the Turkey was a NATO ally for the political reasons. So they actually, the village, my relatives, they actually forgot that they're Turks. They actually almost forgot that there wasn't anything before the Soviets. Okay, there was no war, and etc. But right before the collapse, everything just started again. Yeah, the war started. They actually learned. My relatives said that we forgot that we are Turks. Armenians called us the Turks, and then from them we remembered that our ethnicity. We forgot who we are and stuff like that. So when there still be like nationalism, like ultra nationalism, or I don't know, like lack of empathy, the peace, I don't think that peace will never come. Peace will never come, of course. Like, because when people cannot forget something happened in 70 years, I don't think, and that it's so I think that it will take a lot of time to absorb things that two nations has, lived, especially when the latest war has happened only 6 months ago. So there should be some, two nations need some time to absorb things that happened. And also actually agree with the diaspora thing. During the war or aftermath of the war, I noticed that the locals in the Caucasus from both Armenia and Azerbaijan, they were a little bit like willing to have a dialogue from what I see on Twitter. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, especially in diaspora or in Russia, it doesn't matter, Azerbaijanis or Armenians in Europe, United States, they were a little bit like pro-conflict because this conflict does not affect their lives. They live their life abroad, but the people in a region, they suffer a lot from the conflict, you know, especially we should understand them because us and our parents were deported, had to live a refugee life. So we should understand the people, we should understand what people want in this region. And what I want is that the future, when there will be no need for the peacekeepers between the two countries, because my wish is that there will be no third powers in this region. So every country, every nation should have their own, how to say, interests, and of course no more like extremely territorial demands. Because for example, if you want peace, you have to keep your conditions a little bit too low. Because if you have some I don't know, like conditions, give me that or do this, and then there will be peace. It's not a peace. It's just, I don't know. It's like it's just you're demanding something. I don't know, but it's not a peace. So what we need is empathy. I don't know, understanding. Maybe not too much demanding. Yeah, maybe we can move on, but of course it will take time. And that's it.
Thank you, Farid. Aidan.
Yes, Anna, would like to close with you. So you mentioned the traumatic events from your family's life and the pogroms, and you still maintain a hopeful vision for the region. Could you explain why that is and elaborate?
Thank you. I hope I can answer it, find the words to like express it correctly. But during this conflict, there were times, in the start where I was feeling very emotionally lost and not sure what was really going on and why there was so much hate between the two of us. And in the beginning, I was really upset too. Like I wasn't really thinking of the other side. I was just thinking we're completely being targeted, and it hurts to like see that a whole nation of people may not like you just for your existence. And once I started really looking into this conflict and why my family became refugees and what really happened to us, and I started learning more and more, and I kept being, in shock, like the things that my little, my siblings went through when they were just, Zaur's age and Farid's age. It's, I couldn't imagine being 10 or 11 and being, seeing people get beaten up or being beaten up just for being Armenian or Azerbaijani. So the more I heard these things, and then there was a point during the war where my mom was really upset and crying about kind of the repetition of what has happened, and how she tried to kind of keep this from us and, hope that we wouldn't have to experience the same things that, my parents and grandparents had to experience when the first conflict was going on. And it kind of just made me think, if my family went through this deportation and had to restart their entire lives, and my siblings had to like hide under the window when there was people going through their streets saying like, leave Armenians and, things like that. For my family to not have instilled any hate in me or fear in me or any of those things, for them to be able to, let all of that go, it kind of seems silly for anyone else or, any of us to not want peace and not want this to stop and not want this to change. So I'm hopeful that, with platforms like this, the more of us speaking and telling our stories, and the more I'm learning about, Azerbaijanis having to leave Armenia and, you know, more of fellow Armenians having to leave Azerbaijan, it kind of starts to make sense and kind of easy to find compassion and empathy for each other. So I'm just hoping more of that comes from this, and really hoping there aren't any more conflicts. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Okay, thank you, everybody. This finishes the Q&A from us, from the hosts. Thank you so much to our guests, Stan, Zaur, Anna, Farid, for your opinions, your experiences, your points of view. I'll go quickly, I'll check some of the questions. So just a second. I believe there's a question to you, Anna, from Gasia, asking if you know how far your family goes in Baku.
Was the question, how far do my family, how many generations?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
I believe it's my great grandparents were the ones who initially ended up in Baku. So there was a couple lineages of our family being there. I'm not sure exactly how they ended up in Azerbaijan. All I know is most of the time, it was under Soviet rule. So it kind of was very mixed, and hopefully that answers that question.
We don't have yet, and thank you, Anna. We don't have yet any other questions. So if anyone has another question, you can send on the chat and you can write what you would like to ask, and you can ask it yourself eventually. We also had a comment, I believe, Aidan, from one of our members,
Arthur,
right?
I don't know if Arthur, you want to mention it yourself?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I might like butcher your name. I'm ethnic and I can't pronounce ethnic names. So I want to talk about sorry, Zarun. Hi. I saw that photo of like you and your whole like classmates, and I think that was the school my mom went to in Yerevan. She was like born in 74, so she's like, I don't know if you guys like went during the same time or not. 1974.
So maybe I was in the same class like your mom?
Yes.
Well, so it's amazing. You reconnect your mother on this picture?
I don't think I saw in her picture, but I know she went to that school.
Oh, maybe not the same class then. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so it was a G class, you know, it was a 6, something like 4, 5, or 3, and then was G. So you can find, it's amazing because I was looking for, when I'm preparing the issue, the debate, I was looking for, and I found in my archives, I can show it. I don't share because it was not about the things, but I find what we call in Russian похвальный list. I mean, it's a gratification certificate from school. Okay, it's from this thing. Yeah, we think it's B. I'm sorry, it's a B class. Okay, so whatever 2, 3, 4, and 5th B, and it was this written here in Armenian and at other side in Russian, and it was amazing because I found all that, and also I found my school notes, I mean official documents with all marks for each quarter. So it's amazing. Yeah, I think we find many things when we're looking for in the past.
Thank you, Arthur and Saur. If we have any other questions related to the topic, maybe you can ask them, or you can also specify who you want to ask them to. And if not, we can just go to our our closing remarks from each of our guests. We have 4, so that might take longer than usual. So yeah, let's go to the closing remarks.
Actually, I think someone is trying to ask something.
you mind if I ask a question real quick?
Oh, yeah, if it's good, a good question.
It's for so I mean listening to all four of your stories, well, first of all, thank you for sharing your heartbreaking stories of you or your families leaving your homes during these nationalist pogroms and deportations. However, your stories also make clear that often the ones who have faced the most traumatic and terrible of these experiences have also experienced the most kindness and compassion from the other side, quote unquote. So you are the ones who have the best understanding of what it's like living together in peace as well. Anna, your story especially of families of different ethnicities, each with their own reasons of seeking refuge, living in a way that allowed you to have a non-nationalist relationship with, you know, both Azerbaijanis and Armenians. That's awesome to hear. On the flip side, it seems like diaspora members from both sides, both Azerbaijani and Armenian diaspora members who are physically removed from the conflict. I mean, I know there are several diaspora members that have ended up abroad for tragic reasons. But for us that are not home right now, who are trying to fight the fight for compatriots back in the Caucasus, not just for our ancestors, but for people like you who have recently faced such incredible injustice, what do you recommend that we that we fight for? Because it seems that from both sides, it seems to trigger more hatred and conflict.
Sorry about that. So was Nasrin, was your question to Anna?
Oh, I guess to all of you, and I mean, Anna, you live here in America with experiences with both ethnicities living peacefully. So maybe you are especially best suited to answer this question, but it's for all. Like, what can we as diaspora members do to ease tensions because our actions ultimately can negatively affect what we call home and people like you?
I'll answer, but I think everyone probably has a good perspective too. But I honestly think the more we, start to have, a way to meet the other side. So I've talked to some Armenians who have never met or spoken to anyone from Azerbaijan, and they have a totally different perspective. And I've also talked to Azerbaijanis who didn't even know Armenians lived in Azerbaijan, up until recent, had no idea about the pogroms. So I think, kind of breaking that barrier and, filling that gap so people know that, the others exist and not to kind of demonize them any longer is, I think, the best way to go about it. Because I know a lot of the diasporans on either side don't know one another, and it's only our parents and grandparents who actually lived, together, who do know and do have more compassion. So I would say we need more of these groups. We need more, we need to be more inclusive. I personally have gone to different states, like in New York, for example, there's some sort of restaurant called Baku Palace. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go. My family and I went there for dinner. And it's like, you guys could also look up Armenian restaurants and go and then introduce yourself. Just little steps, make it not so scary. I think that would be a good start.
Thank you, Anna. And Saud, I think you have your hand raised, so maybe you can answer and also at the same time make your closing remarks so we can all.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's very, Nasrin had, it's a good point, Nasrin. Thank you very much for this. The main point, I actually dealt with this point in France many years ago when President Sarkozy was running for presidential election. He raised this huge question, which is living together in peace, because, we have in France, unfortunately, some problem with integration of some people. I'm dealing with foreigners during past 15 years, and my role was an integrator, so showing the way to the people who want to come in a different country from the country of origin, in new host country, and want to integrate. So I was showing the way, the mistake to avoid, and to how to make to integrate. And the main idea is to living in this country together in peace. And I think that's the main thing, main approach we have to. So we have to thinking about our compatriots, both Azerbaijanis and Armenian, that will live in Karabakh and also in both countries, in Azerbaijan and Armenia, in the borders. You know, there's for example, just an example, the question of border walkers. We call them border walkers. The people living close to the border. For example, in Europe, in France and European laws, they allow to, well, now there's no borders, but when there was border, they don't need to visa to go to another country, to neighbor country, to sell their products and vice versa. So all that things we have to think about, and unfortunately, that will be only possible if we change the deep things in mentality. And I think it's a lot of things to do, which in the processes which we call the socialization of kids, because if the kids from very little, they're taught that Azerbaijan is an enemy, Turkey is an enemy, and vice versa, Armenians are bad, so the child will grow and will have that image of historical enemy with scaring, and will go through the problem. Of course, this is in the hands of policymakers. But as I told before, as a ordinary citizen, we have our word to say. We're saying everywhere that we are now experiencing post-totalitarian era, and we're in democracy. We're going to democracy more and more. So as we're going towards democracy, it's normal that citizens can say what they want to say. The main, of course, main thing is it's a fight. The xenophobia, nationalism, and all that bad manifestation. And the step to do it's now to open the communications and begin to having dialogue, talk, and also the stopping having scaring of extremes, of extremists, whatever in whatever situation, and saying that we are citizens and the future belongs to us, because we want our children's, our grandchildren's live in a peace and not be obliged to engage in a war, in an army, and be sent to having a conflict again. Thank you.
Thank you, Zaur. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. There's a comment from Orhan. Some of you might remember Orhan from our second meeting. He says his internet connection is slow, and he asked me to read it. Thanks to all the speakers, great personal stories, interesting dialogue. I do agree with Farid. Diaspora, either Azerbaijani or Armenian, should not forget that everything they are doing affects directly people in these countries. So they have to be very careful and think of themselves as guests to the region and not decision makers. Imagine yourself walking into a foreign village, put your feet carefully onto this ground. Speak to each other, Azerbaijanis and Armenians, and try to work on creating human relationships. Thanks, Orhan.
Stanislav, would you like to say some closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you. So to go back to first to Nazreen's question, I mean, I'm an attorney. I practice family law. Family law is high conflict from, mom and dad or two parents. It's usually someone fighting over their child in the context of a divorce or a custody battle. So it's two people who are very adversarial, who have at times, not just different opinions, but opinions that are contra opposite the other. And my belief is that I always tell my clients to practice agreement building before you run to court, before you run to battle, and law court is the battlefield, I guess, to practice building agreements. Because if you find you can agree that you want your child to learn to swim, you can agree that you want to put your child in swim practice. You can agree that you will split the costs. You can agree that you will work your schedule to accommodate the practice and the meets. And I think talking is step one. In law and in my profession, especially with people who have resources, it's easier to facilitate that kind of talking. So whether there's a mediator or a therapist, if people cannot first talk, finding a platform like this, or where moderation and direction can keep dialogue going, But Armenia and Azerbaijan are neighbors. You can't solve the conflict by moving to a new neighborhood. You live in the same space, and it all starts with talking. And I think, like I said, we all want the same thing. We all want to live and we all want to prosper. And if we all agree that that is our goal, our shared mutual goal, and we can practice building agreements that foster that relationship, then I think we, hopefully can all move forward. Honesty, respect. People sometimes ask me, in divorce law, why do you see people divorcing? Why do you see breakup? Why do you see people fighting and conflict? And it's sure, there's infidelity and there's money, but generally it's disrespect. It's contempt for the other party that leads to a conflict. If I meet two people and somebody says they cheated on me and they spent all my money, that divorce will be easy. You will reconcile the budget. You will, you're breaking up, so you don't really ultimately care who cheated on who. But if there's disrespect, that's gonna be something that reverberates and travels throughout the whole process of resolution. I mean, my job is to resolve a conflict. It's not to foster a conflict. And that's because I think of myself as a good attorney. But there are bad attorneys and there are bad politicians who foster conflict. Attorneys foster conflict for their own financial gain. If you're fighting, if my client is fighting and I'm billing for that fight and the fight is ongoing, I have a secured source of income. And if I'm a politician who is fostering conflict because I can financially gain from that conflict, I'm a bad politician. And people are people across the board. There are good politicians in all countries. And if people focus on the goal, on resolution, and not billing and conflict, I think, we can all get along. And that's kind of how I think of all conflict, and this geopolitical conflict is we all have the same goal. We can work to resolve the goal, or we can work to bill and generate income for our own pockets and our own sides. And I think, kind of what Anna said, go to a restaurant, go to a setting. It's funny, there's an Armenian-owned grocery store in San Francisco, and when I go to it, there are some ingredients, some words that I default to saying, again, what I thought was a Russian word, but what is an Azerbaijani word for the item? And you can see how people react to it. And then you say, but I use this vocab because it's the only word I know, but I'm here, supporting this story. And I think people, once you break down that kind of initial opportunity to disagree, we can all agree we all want the same thing. And hopefully with conversations and with interactions, that grows.
Thank you so much.
Super cool.
Thank you, Stan. Love the metaphors. Farid, would you like to say your closing remarks, please?
First of all, thank you for this meeting. I believe that maybe because the only way of peace is conversation and talking with each other. There is not a way. Actually, you don't have to agree with each other. Just talk, just have a conversation, just listen. But you don't have to agree. Actually, sometimes I don't agree with the other side, but I just want to talk. Just want to have a conversation about what do you see this region in 50 years? I don't know. Or maybe about the future of our region. I don't know. But yeah, conversation is the must. And actually, because of the internet, maybe there is a hope. Because before, in 1990s, when there was a first war, there wasn't internet. The people didn't know what's happening on the other side. In early 2000s, there were trenches and the in ceasefire line and the other side of the trenches. You don't know what's happening there, so you think that everything is bad on the other side. But then when connecting, you just have to connect with each other, and that's all. maybe then we can hope for the better future. And I don't want to take your time anymore, so thank you.
No, thank you, Farid. And lastly, Anna, please, if you have some last words, some closing remarks.
Thank you. I kind of feel like I said my last words, but thank you for the platform. And I just truly hope that there will be, you know, more opportunities to kind of come together. And I really hope that, you know, there will be less of this back and forth fighting. And, you know, just, I would say with trying to find blame, I think it's easy to just say, you know, someone did this or someone did that, or, you know, the diaspora on one side is being a little too aggressive or the other. I think it's better to, instead of quickly, you know, finding someone to blame, I think it's better to just stop and kind of think about where they're coming from, think about why they're being so passionate and aggressive. And, you know, I think it's just an easier way to not find a, you know, be so easy to be mad at the other person. But thank you again for letting me talk. And it was a great time. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Now for my co-host to say goodbye as well. Aidan, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to thank all of you, Farid, Stan, Zaur, Anna, for coming on, sharing all your personal stories. It means a lot, and I think we all learned quite a lot today. So thanks for that.
I also want to second
yeah, sorry.
that.
Arnold.
Yes, I also want to second that. Anna, Zaur, Farid, and Stein, thank you for sharing all these interesting stories, your perspectives, your thoughts and opinions. I think this was a meeting a lot of people were anticipating, and actually they wanted to see a meeting like this, and it means a lot to hear from you and your experience, your family experiences. And I also want to thank everyone who joined us, everyone who's helping us with various tasks, including translations, and my co-organizers, Diego and Aidan. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Aidan, Arnold, Zaur, Stan, Farid, Anna, everyone who's joined today, everyone who's helping us with, as a collaborator with the translation teams and the other teams. Thank you so much. And I also want to second what Arnold said. This meeting was very anticipated by us as well. So I also want to thank you again to our guests for making it possible, for agreeing to this platform to share. I think it was very, despite the different ideas and opinions that you all might have, it's very good to see, to be able to, you know, hold them in a same space and platform, just as opportunity to hear the other persons as well. So thank you, everybody, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.